All right, so let's get into archaea now. So archaea have a few different categories. Archaea really are the extremophiles. They're the ones that live in these extreme environments generally. So methanogens create methane as a waste product. They're obligate anaerobes. They live in cows. So they're creating methane. Extreme halophiles live in very salty places. Extreme thermophiles live in very hot places. So they're living in these extreme environments. So probably these were living in those environments early on in evolution as well. Prokaryotes are really important, I said, for ecological health, for human health. In ecological health, they help with bioremediation. So this can happen in nature, but it's happening, humans can modify prokaryotes to do this as well. But like, for example, cleaning up oil spills or other disasters that prokaryotes may be able to help with. The nitrogen cycle, without bacteria converting the nitrogen gas, we would not have a source of nitrogen atoms because humans and plants cannot use nitrogen gas. They can't use N2. They need nitrate or ammonia. That's why when we have gardens, there's fertilizers and they contain nitrates in them to help make our plants grow better. The carbon cycle, they participate in the carbon cycle by taking carbon atoms from the air and using them to build organic molecules. And then the decomposers take those and they put them back into the air as CO2. So ecological health. They're also really helpful, really important for human health. Our digestive system relies on them to help us get nutrients. Our immune system relies on them to help fight infections. So we're covered in bacteria inside and out, and those bacteria are blocking the way for the pathogens. They're taking up space and outcompeting pathogens. They also participate in many other symbiotic relationships. So eukaryotes diversity. If we look at eukaryotes, there are 6 kingdoms total in all domains. So there's 3 domains, we said: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. In bacteria domain, there's 1 kingdom, bacteria. In archaea domain, there's 1 kingdom, archaebacteria. And then eukarya have 4 kingdoms: protists, fungi, plant, and animal. But I do want to mention that this is ever-changing and it's really subjective in some ways, and it does change. For example, back in 1735, Linnaeus first came up with the system, and he just called them Vegetabilia and Animalia, right? And then we learned that there were these microorganisms, and so we added those in as protists. And then we learned that there were prokaryotes, and so we then changed it to prokaryote and eukaryote. And then it was Monera for the longest time. And then at some point we added in fungi, and then we figured out there were 2 different kinds of prokaryotes, archaea, and bacteria. And then we added in chromista, which is another kingdom. And so there are a bunch of modifications that happen, and which one do we follow? It doesn't really matter. For us, it's more about knowing what things share in common. So what do all eukaryotes have in common? They all have a cell membrane, and actually prokaryotes do too. Some have a cell wall, but their cell wall is not made of peptidoglycan like bacteria. They're made of cellulose, which is a carbohydrate. It's a polysaccharide. Fungi have a chitin cell wall, which is more like what shells are made of. They all have membrane-bound organelles, including a nucleus, mitochondria, etc. Some protists and all plants have chloroplasts to help them do photosynthesis. They also have DNA. It's usually found in multiple chromosomes, and they have ribosomes, just like prokaryotes. There's a category of eukaryotes that are unicellular, called protists, but protists are not a monophyletic kingdom. There are lineages within the group that are classified as kingdoms. So let me explain what that means in a second. So they're the most diverse eukaryotic kingdom. They contain autotrophic organisms, heterotrophic organisms, mixotrophic, meaning they can do both. Some do sexual reproduction, some do asexual, some are unicellular, some are multicellular. Most have some sort of way of movement, like flagella or cilia or pseudopods. But those flagella are not homologous with the prokaryotic flagellum, so they do not have a common ancestor that has a flagellum. They evolved separately. The same thing, the cilia, same thing with cilia. I wanted to show you what I mean when I say that protists are paraphyletic. So here's the common ancestor of all eukaryotes, and the orange bits, all this whole thing is eukarya. The fungi are this red branch here, animals are this red branch, land plants are this green branch. Everything else are protists. So you can see, like, these protists are more closely related to animals than they are to these protists over here, right? Or these protists are more closely related to land plants than they are to these protists over here, right? So when I say it's paraphyletic, that means that it includes the ancestor, all of the descendants, except for some. So it does not include all the descendants. This will become more clear when you talk about chapter 26 in class. Archaea and eukarya have a lot more in common with each other than archaea and bacteria do. So that's where that branching comes from, where archaea and eukarya have a more recent common ancestor. And then here are some well-known protists. Amoeba, Proteus, malaria-causing plasmodium in a red blood cell. Trichonympha lives in the guts of termites. This is African sleeping sickness. Amoebic dysentery is down here. So those are just some examples of protists.